All right, hello and welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Publisher Lab. Very special in that, we've done these Publisher Lab inside the Publisher Lab collaborations once before when we did the Pubtelligence wrap-up together, and I don't know actually when we're going to air that one, but this is a collaborative effort in which we are actually recording a full-length episode of the Publisher Lab, and we're going to also make it fully available on Inside the Publisher Lab, our show after the show, if you will. The Inside the Publisher Lab is our video show that we usually do a deep dive on a topic from the Publisher Lab podcast. In this case, we are also video recording our entire Publisher Lab podcast today, for the reason being that we have John Cole, early podcast co-host with me.
I guess I was co-host.
And then you jumped across the pond, and now we get you every now and then. And
exactly, when you come over this side.
Yeah.
So we're in London.
That's right, we are in London. So if you hear some London street noises in the background, it's because we're right off the streets here in Covent Garden, John?
Covent Garden, that's where we are. So you hear like horses clip-clopping by, the sound of, this swirling fog outside the window. I know that a lot of Americans think about these things, kind of Sherlock Holmes London rather than
And Shelby, this is your first time here, right?
It's my first time. I'm a little disappointed that it's like nothing like Hogwarts, but I'll let it slide. So it's I wanted to start the show with Google, and they're saying that putting more content out doesn't necessarily make your site better. And nor does it make your website rank higher either. So that's according to John Mueller, of course. This is a little bit counterintuitive because most people probably think that, the more you put out, the more chances you have to rank for different keywords, the better. But Google says if you want to rank, the key is to create content that's better than the other content Google has in their index. So what are your thoughts on that?
I have an opinion on that because
hop on in.
When we first got ESO going, and we actually bought a bunch of sites in order to test our theories about ad location and ad density and the effect of changing backgrounds and menus and things on user experience. So we have a whole bunch of sites that haven't had any content added to them in 7 or 8 years, which is a shame.
But it's also a very nice control group for a conversation.
And there's very few. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Wait a second.
Bless you.
No, not coming. Okay, sorry. But that is as you said, as a control group, it's very unusual that somebody will have the discipline to say, I'm just going to not do this anymore, unless it's just a site that happens to be hosted on the internet that nobody's looking at. But of course, I now look at keyword rankings for those sites and I say, that is really, really interesting. That site just went right up in the rankings and literally we haven't changed any of the content. So I would love to be able to unpick this more fully, but I can totally see why Google would actually come out and say that.
Yeah, so it's a great case study for you can, in a lot of cases, not add content and still move up in the rankings. I think, as a digital publisher, the advice of don't create new content is probably a terrible piece of advice.
It is a terrible piece of advice for generally, yes.
But I think it does point out something that I think is really important, and it's where I always try to steer publishers whenever they ask us or ask me for SEO advice. I've kind of separated myself from the world of SEO, even though that is a primary area of expertise that I have, and I really like listening to people like Bill Slosky, who spoke at Pubtelligence recently, who looks at Google patents and the way that a search algorithm works from a technical standpoint, because I like to understand those things. Because when you start hearing people talk about building backlinks and they start to give these kind of like broad pieces of advice, or they start talking about this recent Google Medic update. I even hate that it was called the Medic update because it kind of taps into some fake news that only health sites were affected, or
it's to do with authority, isn't it? So if you don't have medical qualifications that Google can reference, then it isn't graded as strongly as other sites that do.
And that's fake news, and that's rumor mongering that's happened because certain sites have been impacted. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. We've talked a little bit about the impact of things like Google being able to crawl a site and seeing that there's a lot of affiliate links on a site. So a site that's espousing that it's a authority on a subject may not be able to be trusted to the same degree if they have like a third party interest living on the page or something like that. But I think, when you look at things at a more technical level, the advice that Google gives really is the best advice that you can get sometimes, which is create great content, make your content on a particular topic better than somebody else's content, and it will rank higher. throughout my entire career, every site that I've ever touched, I've never focused on trying to go out and build backlinks. I've focused on building really great content that really touches on a subject from a full breadth. So if I'm going to write about Abraham Lincoln, to borrow a subject that Bill used in the presentation that we heard him do recently, that you can actually watch on this channel. The biggest thing is, if I'm going to write an article on that, I want to deep dive into the subject and give somebody all the information they could possibly want from that topic.
Yeah.
Or if it's something that's shorter, I want to condense it and make it as easily digestible as possible. Whatever it is I think they're looking for, I want to deliver that better than other people. And if you're not doing that and you think you're going to build backlinks, or you're going to somehow hack on-page stuff, or you're going to make your site faster and that's going to make you rank higher, you're really focusing on all the wrong stuff. And it's the stuff that Google's been telling people for years.
Yeah. And being first as well is important in a particular niche. And I think that's why, when I was looking through some of the older sites when I was prepping for that speech, looking at the rankings going up was really interesting to me. And I thought, I wonder why that happened. One of the things that crossed my mind, which is worth pointing out, is the idea that if you've not been watching other sites copy your content, and if you produced it first and you've got the authority in that particular subject, Google will find those sites out and go, oh, we indexed this site 12 years ago on this particular subject. This one that produced a very similar article 3 years ago, which was pretty much a copy. Google's finding those guys out.
They're just like, that's a bit suspicious.
So yeah, that's right. And I just think that Google's actually getting better at giving quality, which of course they need to if they're going to stay at the top.
And Shelby, you follow a lot of these different SEO rumors, and you follow a lot of these folks on Twitter. I mean, there's a lot of noise out there, and I think, when somebody's looking for like authorities on this subject, where do you go to get the good news? I know you're always in this material. What types of sources are trustworthy in this sense?
Well, I mean, I usually will tend to look to bigger publications that have a lot more authority, but then again, I kind of do a little bit more back research and look for, what is newer, because it's not just about like, everything that the New York Times says is written in stone or whatever. So I think it's really just kind of about diversifying your resources.